Hello and welcome to the Kiwi Advisor Network podcast. I am the host, Warwick Slow, and today's guest is Alistair Ross from Revolution Infosec. Alistair is a self-described information security geek, and he works with some advice businesses on how they can shore themselves up against cybersecurity threats. In this video, what we discuss is 10 or 12 tips that you can implement that are really easy, that'll make a big difference. It's like insurance, you know. It's the type of thing where if you put a little bit of time in now, you'd be so happy you did in the future. Alistair is really approachable. He actually runs his own podcast and YouTube channel. So it was a great conversation. Dives very deep into it, so please persevere. It's definitely worth it. And if you could only pick one or two things out of it, you'll be so stoked you did it in the long run. So this does count towards your CPD hours. So make sure you log it. And if you'd like to listen to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can find us there at Can Podcast. So otherwise, enjoy the podcast. Alistair Ross from Revolution Infosec. Thanks for joining us here today.
Pleasure to be with you, Warwick.
One of those things I think a lot of financial advice businesses probably know is really important, but it's difficult to know where to start.
There is just so much information out there. I think the market, it's just awash with information. And how do you make sense of it all? Really, you just want to get on with running your own business. You don't want to think all the time about cybersecurity, unless you've got a team of people who are eager as hell to just get on with cybersecurity, which is probably not most of New Zealand business.
Well, most of the financial service businesses are 50% of them actually are 1 to 3 person entities. So you're already focusing on so much marketing, sales, advice process, compliance. There's a lot to worry about without even taking into account information security. So you had some stats before that I think you were going to share with us.
Yeah, I think, look, all the cybersecurity people seem to come out with all these stats that I guess are made to scare you. And I hate scaring people because, that's been done to death. But I think there's 2 stats that have come out pretty recently. So the first one I'll give you, it came out in May of this year, 2023. And I think for me, that's probably the biggest. And that is that 83% of New Zealand businesses, and that's why I like it, this is about our market, 83% of New Zealand businesses are either underprepared or really underprepared for a cyber incident. So we're burying our heads in the sand. And that came out from the market leader in sort of IT security / networking, and that's Cisco. So that was all over stuff, the newspaper. And I think that one really hit home for me that us as a nation specifically are not ready for a cyber incident. And the thing about cyber incidents, is that it's not a matter of if it will happen, it's a matter of when. And I think the biggest problem there is, the blast radius to our organizations, especially if we're a 3 or 4 person business, is if we have our head in the sand, the blast radius is probably the entire business or could be the entire business. And I think it's really important from a risk mitigation perspective that we take that big blast radius that could affect the whole business and reduce it right down. So it's all about managing our risk. The other statistic, which came out from IBM and is a bit more holistic, it's about the market as a whole, is that the average cost of a cyber incident is 4.35 million, and that's US dollars, with 83% of the market experiencing 1 or more security incidents. So that's a more recent, I think that was back in June or July of this year.
I like that you don't want to scare people. It naturally is a scary thing. We tried the same thing with compliance, because people are scared of the FMA. Yeah. And, what we're preaching is, look, don't worry about it. Let's try and build your confidence, build your processes so that you feel well versed, so that if something were to happen, you're well prepared. Because it can happen in a variety of different ways. Even this morning, my mum, who's in her 60s, she got a text from somebody that said, hey mum, this is my new number. Delete my other one and save this. Yeah. And so impressed with her. Her alarm bell started ringing. She sent a message out. She's, I'm pretty sure this is a spam message, but just want to check with you kids that you haven't actually changed your number. And you just think I was actually really proud of her. I said, well done. But you think about how many people out there, it's a numbers game. If you send that message out to a number of people and you have, a bit of information about their demographic, who they are, you're probably going to get a few people responding. So I guess what we want to do is make the people seem less targetable So the least desirable target for the scammers, and also just making people a bit wiser to the types of ways that people will get access to their data.
Yeah, and the thing is that with the scammers, it's very cheap, very easy as well to send out these scams to millions of people. They don't care which country you're in. They don't care at all. So little old New Zealand, it's not that we're in New Zealand, it's any country. They just send these out, and all they need is a handful of replies to make these things worth their time. So if they send it out to 1 million people and only 5 respond and they're suckered into these things, that's good enough for them, right? The fact that they can actually use your technology as a jumping point as well for free, if they've managed to get onto your tech and infect it with whatever their wares is, they can use your tech to send out more spam and more viruses or malware to make the message go further, and then they use a command and control center to take it back. So I think realistically, it's very small numbers of people who are suckered in by this sort of attack that really matter for them. So yeah.
And I guess today we wanted to approach this episode as like, what are some simple, quick methods that businesses can do to make or slightly protect themselves in a cybersecurity sense. So I think it can be quite tough because you don't know where to start. So we were trying to go through and get like a list of maybe like 10 or 12 key parts that are really easy to implement, because it's like your house or your car. If somebody really wants to get in and steal it, they probably can.
Yeah.
But the key is making it the least desirable target as possible.
That's right. And I think if you look online for best advice, there is quite a lot of good advice out there, but there is also a myriad of conflicting information, or buy our product, or whatever it might be. And realistically, what you're saying here is there's about 10 to 12 points, and we'll go through these today. So hopefully if you set those right, at least that limits that blast radius that I mentioned earlier on. I think that there is a really important thing. Once you reduce that blast radius, I say when, not if, when you get attacked, at least it's only going to be a small area, and hopefully that won't affect your business in a big way. You might get a virus or something like that, but it only affects one PC, and it's quick and easy to remedy that. So yeah, let's really try and help here to bring down that possible thing. But I wanted to also talk about how these things happen as well. So first of all, the reason that these things happen could be, phishing. That's a big area. I do have some statistics on that, but I won't bore you with those numbers right now. But phishing and spear phishing, which is the act of really dialing in to the information about that business. So some attackers will, look on a website first of all and see who the CEO is of your business. You might have heard of these ones where people are asking for iTunes vouchers to, provide, to somebody on their team, as a nice favor. That's the idea of that is spear phishing, right? They've gone and done a little bit of research to find out a person's name in the business, so that automatically creates a level of trust because, oh yeah, I know that person, that's the CEO. And they're asking me. But you have to ask, why would the CEO want me to go down to the dairy and get some scratch cards? Stuff like that. It's a bit unusual. So it's all about using our minds and really second guessing. And so just like your mother there, she was clever enough to go, hold on a minute, this just sounds a little bit strange. What's happening now as well is, 2023, this ChatGPT stuff, AI basically, is becoming so clever that it's taking the manual approach of the spear phishing stuff away from the human being. So it's making that process even quicker. There's not so much human interaction. So these spear phishing campaigns are going to get more and more intelligent, and they're going to come out even thicker and faster. So I think that's one of the areas of how. There's also social engineering, which is the act of phoning people up or just making really, really clever contacts with people in a way that they try and make themselves very believable, sound trustworthy, to the point where people release information that they probably shouldn't do. And that a lot is that can happen over the phone as well. So don't just think of it as an email only thing. There is insider threats. There's websites that you shouldn't click on, and links in email as well. So all of that sort of stuff. And of course, there's good old viruses and malware. And then, of course, there's just negligence as well. People who, do things they probably shouldn't. So there's a number of ways in on the how aspect. So just be aware that, it's not just a one way in that causes these threats to actually start to perpetrate themselves within an organization.
And another common one is also just physical. Yeah. People walking into the office, you've left your computer open, you left your phone on your desk, they take it, they go out, you've just gone off to make a cup of tea. All of a sudden, that is a massive risk to the business. So running things like a clear desk policy is...
that was one of the things I was going to raise. Yeah, definitely. A clear desk policy is a really, really good thing to have. I went out to the loo earlier on whilst we were setting up and preparing for this. I don't know if you noticed, but I had my laptop on the desk. The first thing I did was close the laptop so that nobody could get into it.
Did you notice as well when I went to get waters, I locked the computers?
There you go.
There you go.
You're onto it.
Good.
Good stuff.
Because, that is a really common one. People just will try it on. Mm-hmm. When I was living in the UK, I worked for a company, and twice we had like an office downstairs, and it was only one person in there, and there was a back door that they used to go out and vape out. And I always said, make sure you lock the door when you go out. Yeah. Sure enough, they didn't. And we had it on video. Somebody came in, grabbed their handbag, and it happened twice.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just that laptops are valuables. It's not the theft aspect. It's about what information is on that laptop. And information, is power, is knowledge, is worth something in this day and age. We used to be in the Industrial Revolution, and in the Industrial Revolution, it was all about, the steam engines making money. In today's industry, we're always about the information and what intellectual property could do to hurt your business. So anybody having that insider knowledge, it's that knowledge is worth a lot of money to some people. So yeah, if it gets in the wrong hands, that's really very important to keep that information to yourself. Yeah, definitely. And there are things, the physical threats as well. Since we're on the topic, recently I discovered a tool which I have one to play with, and it's called an OMG. There are others out there that exist, but the one that's popular is called an OMG. And it looks just like a normal charging cable for your iPhone or a USB thumb drive. That's what it looks like. Plug it in. All of a sudden, it's taken over the keystrokes of your computer. In some cases, you don't even need to be logged into the computer. So, you could give it to somebody unwittingly. They would plug it into the USB, and all of a sudden, that computer can now be remotely controlled. It has a Wi-Fi connection. It can completely take over your computer. So don't take USB sticks or charging cables from just a stranger. Question these things. So you really have to be vigilant. Yeah, just trust your computer. Use your computer as if it was the crown jewels to your organization. I can't stress that enough.
Wow. Okay. So there are a lot of things that are out there, and it can seem quite scary.
Yeah.
A lot of things that can put people's businesses at risk. But I think what are like, should we start going through the list? Like, what are those key parts that they can do? And look, we'll put some notes underneath in the show description just to link, because I know it's a lot to remember. But if we start at the top, like, what would be the first thing you'd always recommend to somebody saying, how do I protect myself?
I think so. Yeah, definitely multi-factor authentication. This is not a new thing, but it's certainly growing and growing. So a lot of applications out there, apps on your phone, apps on just websites themselves, rather than saying, log in with a username and password, you have an opportunity to use multi-factor authentication. And there's apps out there such as the Microsoft Authenticator or the Google Authenticator app that do basically the same thing. There's also another bunch of apps out there that do the same thing, but ultimately these apps they might have a username and a password, and then another form of authentication. So they'll give you a sort of one-time token. There's also things like UB keys, which slot into a USB stick as well. So there are different methods of doing multi-factor authentication. There is two-factor authentication, which will connect via, allow you to log in via a code on your mobile phone. So
text message.
Absolutely. Now, that's shown to be weaker, and there are ways around that. So if you have an option whether you can use something like Google Authenticator versus the text mode, then always choose the Google Authenticator or the Microsoft Authenticator apps over the text ones. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. But these are actually pretty easy. And once you get used to the routine of using some of these apps, they're really not that difficult. You get into that routine. It's not time consuming, and it's quite easy.
I've got mine on my phone.
Yeah.
Every app that has it will have 2FA turned on. So when I jump on, the only annoying part is that you're constantly logging into some systems and they don't seem. You click on that box that says "Remember this device," but every time you log back in, it seems to want to do the 2FA, which is good and a bad thing. But.
Yeah, I think some web browsers are more secure than others. So if you look at the usuals like Chrome and Firefox and so forth, they tend to store your cookies and they store them on your machine, and so when you click on that thing that says "Remember my device," they will remember your device, and that might be for 14 days. Now, the upshot of that is obviously you don't have to keep entering your information. Great, it's very convenient, but wherever you have convenience, you also have a little bit of insecurity. So it's like that trade-off. The good thing about having other more stronger secured web browsers, I use one called LibreWolf, which is basically a version of Firefox, which they've taken taken it right down to basics. So when you close the browser, it doesn't store any cookies, for example. There's a lot of web browsers out there. Brave is another one. Lots of them, like Chrome, they use the Chrome basis, but then really make it very secure. So you can look into other web browsers as well and go, okay, well, this one here takes that. And again, that level of confidence in that browser it should be a little bit higher because it's not storing all of these things, but the convenience factor is going down a little bit. So yeah, there's that sort of stuff.
So 2FA, I think most people will know about that.
Yeah.
Easy to set up, easy to manage.
For sure.
Fantastic protection.
Yeah.
Because we all know the biggest risk is passwords and getting in. They're easy to crack. I remember there was I think it's gone. It used to have, I think it was howstrongismypassword.net or something like that. And you could type in your password. For example, you put in the word password and see how secure that is. And it says that it can be hacked in like 2 seconds or something like that.
Right, that's right.
And what we figured out is the longer your password is, the more secure it is. So if you type in one that's like 16 characters long, for instance, it'll say like it'll take 300 million years or something to hack before we have a quantum computer. Another story for another day. So yeah, the longer the better. But what would be your kind of key takeaways for password hygiene?
Yeah, I definitely use long passwords. Now, there used to be a philosophy of using really long, difficult passwords and then changing them regularly. I think that, I would say, is antiquated advice. And I mean, like you were saying, there's quantum computing, but that's coming. I think where we are right now is that even long passwords can still be cracked. It's just a matter of time. The power of computing, especially in the cloud, is getting really good all the time. So yes, you can change your passwords, but how are you going to do that in a way that you can realistically remember them? So whilst you could probably remember a few passwords in your head, the amount of things that we generally have passwords for, there are so many of them now, it's really impossible to remember lots of different passwords. So that's impractical. What I'd recommend is we use a password manager. And a password manager, there's lots of different password manager software out there. I think, you've got some recommendations and I have some recommendations. LastPass, I think, is a piece of software had a few problems, so I probably wouldn't recommend LastPass. But other than that, there's lots of good password manager software out there. What these password manager softwares allow you to do is there's a button on them that generates a very secure password with all sorts of strange letters, and they could be 16 characters, like you say. And they also have, things like characters like hashes and exclamation marks and so forth. So they're really passwords that you would never remember in a month of Sundays and pretty hard to crack. So the good thing about that is you don't have to remember them because the password manager remembers them for you, and you can just copy and paste those into the website or the app that needs to use them. So if you cannot use MFA, some websites don't give you the option to use MFA, at least you can use a password manager to pop the password into those websites.
So when we went through and got our ISO certification, one of the things that I did was look at all of my passwords across all of my accounts and change them. And I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult than it was, but we have Dashlane, which is the password manager set up, and you can go through and you can effectively go and just generate new passwords, click save, and then next time you log in, it just pre-fills that.
That's it. Yeah.
It's changed my life.
Yeah.
And even I had some saved on like Google passwords, and I could export those and then import them into Dashlane as well. So if you've got them managed on like a separate system, I know some people have them set up through Google, or I'm sure like Apple might even have a similar thing. You can export them and import them into a more, not to say they're not secure, but into another system that you'd prefer to use.
And the thing is that, I think we're all guilty of this. I certainly was back in the day, is password reuse. So using the same password on multiple websites. Now, I used that password because I didn't really care about those websites. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. You should really get into a process of using good password hygiene. Never use the same password anywhere, even if you think, oh, that doesn't really matter. It starts to make a digital profile of you as an individual. So try not to ever reuse your password, and using a password manager just to reset those passwords to stronger password is a really simple way of doing that. So, yeah.
I think a lot of people would be guilty of that. They just have like adaptations of their password that progressively got stronger. You think about the first password you set in like year 2000, basic, and then they go, oh, all of a sudden you need to put some numbers in there, need to make a capital letter, need to add a character. So you've got this like sort of bastardized version of your original password you're still using. So
password 123 exclamation.
Yeah, exclamation. Oh.
No, not a good thing. Not a good thing.
And what will happen often is, say if there's a data breach with the company and it's one of the ones you've just reused the password for, they'll have potentially a copy of your email address, they'll have a copy of your password there. Yeah. And honestly, what they'll do is they'll just go, okay, what are some other accounts this person has? Let's just try that same username, same password, and then all of a sudden they're in.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I was going to mention it later on, but this is probably a good time to mention it. There's a website out. There's a few websites out there, but this one seems to be the sort of leader in finding this out. This is the sort of stuff that you would get forensic cybersecurity people to look into back in the day. But now with the advent of websites like Have I Been Pwned, that's PWNED, we'll put it in the description, I'm sure, but haveibeenpwned.com, it's a really good website because what it does is every time there's a new breach that gets dumped on the dark web, for example, that website will show you if your information has been breached on that. So you can type in your email address and sometimes other things like your name or so forth, and it'll tell you, yes, it's been involved in this particular breach. So automatically what I would be doing when it's been found that your account has been breached in that, whatever the website is, especially if you've reused your password or reused a variant of that password, if you're going in there to haveibeenpwned.com to check for legitimate purposes, you can bet that other people who are more nefarious will be checking on websites like Have I Been Pwned to find out, oh, this person's been breached there. Oh, I've got some password dump online. I'll just reuse that password and check it on these other websites, which may be more interesting, and see it. So that's one reason why you should never reuse a password.
Yeah, that whole Have I Been Pwned thing. I had 2 breaches, I think.
Yeah.
And just looking back, I can't even remember signing up to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the password would be. So, just a good. So haveibeenpwned.com, but it's basically have I been owned, but you replace the O with a P.
Yeah.
Have I been pwned? And put your email address and you'll be surprised. There'll be 1 or 2 in there. I'm sure most people would have it. How many did you have?
Well, I've been using a Gmail for sort of personal things, and there was quite a few, and I think the biggest one was LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn had a really big breach back in 2020 or something like that, and that was clear. So I think most people might find that they've been involved in some sort of breach.
Oh, LinkedIn in general.
LinkedIn's pretty bad.
You can, in fact, you can look in your LinkedIn settings. I did it once. It took me like 15 minutes, but you have to go and turn off all of the data sharing settings in there. So if you're linked with a bunch of people on LinkedIn, what they'll do is they can actually export all of their contacts, email addresses, and information. So if you just have random salespeople adding you, you might go, oh, no worries, I'll add them. But the next thing you know, they've got like all of their clients in a big list that they can then start, sending out marketing material to.
Totally. And so that brings in the whole thing about privacy. So privacy is obviously different from cybersecurity, but if you value your privacy online, you really should be considering what things you should and should not switch on. And I think, I won't go into all the details of this, but every service online has a privacy policy. And of course, reading that privacy policy is a long process. Most of these things, you've got pages and pages and pages. But ultimately, I think just what you're saying there, going into the privacy settings of a service and just unticking everything that you don't like the sound of is probably a good thing. And you might think that you're working with a trusted brand, but if everything that you're not paying for, there's a reason why you're not paying for it, and that's because you become the product. They're making money from you and your data. So that's all I'll say about that. But even trusted, reputable brands like Microsoft, for example, if you think about the last time you paid for Microsoft Windows or something like that, you might notice that they've asked you to sign up for a Microsoft account. And you're thinking, well, is there any real reason for this? I mean, maybe if you're using OneDrive or something like that, but you're not paying for the basic OneDrive subscription, or you're not paying for, other services from Microsoft. And the reason you're not is simply because they can send you ads, or they can send telemetry back to Microsoft. So there's a lot of information about you as an individual that maybe you don't want them knowing. So have a look in your privacy settings in Microsoft Windows if you use Windows, and really you might be surprised at the information they're collecting on you as an individual. So yeah,
it's eye-opening. Yeah. I think there's a lot of, I think in fact that's probably what we're going to see. We're going to see a big change in the way people engage with companies and how they value their data. I think that'll be like a big shift in the next kind of like 10, 20 years or so.
Yeah. It's and look, there's legislation coming in, especially in the financial services industry, that's really putting a lot of things about your privacy, and I think that's going to only grow over time. So yeah, it's definitely, it's not the same as how it was just 10 years ago. There's a lot of impetus being put on an individual's privacy, which is only a good thing. But it's easier than ever to store information about individuals, and that's part of the technology world that we live in. And so
good and a bad thing.
Good and a bad thing. Yeah.
And then this is one that I'm quite passionate about. Public Wi-Fi and why you should not be connecting to it.
Oh, goodness. So as I say, I like to understand the technology behind things. And I said about that OMG USB stick or the charger cable. One of the things I also have is a device called the Wi-Fi Pineapple. And that's a really interesting device. Yeah, they've all got weird names.
The Wi-Fi Pineapple.
The Wi-Fi Pineapple, right? And it kind of looks like a pineapple. It's got all these antennas on it. And you can make baby versions of it that you could go unseen. The baby version sits in your pocket. It's that small. And you can actually make one yourself. So they don't even need a lot of investment. You could probably build one yourself if you're handy with a soldering iron for about $20. So what these things do is they, in one of their modes, they have multiple modes, but I think the most scary one is the sort of what's called in the technology term is a man-in-the-middle attack. So they will set up, if you go to any airport, say, Koru Lounge, and it's got the name Koru or whatever, and it's a free Wi-Fi, so you can connect in there, and you think, oh yeah, I'm in the Koru Lounge, I trust Air New Zealand, they're a good brand. This has nothing to do with Air New Zealand. The particular attacker could have their Wi-Fi Pineapple or similar device and have their Wi-Fi access point and rename it and call it Koru. So you just think, oh yeah, Koru, all good. They can even take the splash screen. So when you log into the Wi-Fi, it sets up that disclaimer saying, hey, you're on the Koru Lounge thing now, and it's got the Air New Zealand.
Conditions.
Yeah, terms and conditions, tick here. It's got the logo on it, so it looks absolutely legit. So you're on the internet, everything's great. You might go to your internet banking, you might log in with your username and password. But what it's doing is it's sucking all of that information that you put in there, usernames, passwords, bank account details, everything, and putting them to one side, storing that information, and then just forwarding you on to the legit website. So you're none the wiser, absolutely none the wiser. There might be a little delay. There might be, that login didn't work. You want to try again. So then it redirects you. There's lots of different ways that this can get you. So there's not just a one method. That's a typical method. This what's called man-in-the-middle attack. So my philosophy on public Wi-Fi is never trust it. I just simply won't use it. Obviously, everybody's got different ways around it. You could use a VPN to encrypt that traffic, but you just simply don't know how these things are protected. So my opinion is I don't use it. I've got my mobile phone and I switch on my hotspot on there. And of course, that's using your data plan. But unless you don't trust your mobile provider, you're much more safe using that. So yeah, I could go on and on and on.
Oh, no,
public Wi-Fi, but
honestly, yeah, I mean,
don't trust it.
It's one of those things. You go to a random airport and you're sitting there and you go, I'm in a country that I'm not normally in. I'm not going to get a SIM card. How do I connect to the internet while I'm at this airport? Yeah. So you connect to it. It's risky. So let's say you're in a situation like that. Like, what are some things you can do to, do you not log into important apps? Do you just
it's really hard, but I simply don't log in. I don't do anything with my mobile devices at all. So I just leave them on. Read a book. Honestly, same goes for hotels as well. I just simply won't use it. I would get myself a SIM card, hopefully from a brand that I would trust. Mostly, I think you're all right with the countries that you go to, and but there are, of course, some countries you might not trust their mobile networks as well, and it's just a case of figuring out who to trust and what to trust. Okay,
because the last thing you need is connecting to some Wi-Fi just to do a bit of Facebook, and then next thing you know, you're actually sending your data to somebody.
Exactly.
A little,
and when you switch on your device, even when you've not gone to even our website, the amount of information that your device is probably just doing on startup, such as getting email. It's quite common that I'll leave my email app open. So if you use Outlook, for example, immediately, as soon as it comes online, and even some Macs, I think, do periodical just searches for new email, even when they're in sleep mode, right? Yeah, that's a feature of the Apple operating system. So they'll just ping your mail server and just see if there's new mail, so that when you start up your computer, all the mail's just instantly there. So that's helpful, but it's also a hindrance if you're in, somewhere that you don't trust. So yeah, again, I could probably go on and on and on about this, but don't trust it. Basically, that's the crux of it.
Yeah. And it might not be an issue, like in most places, you might be fine, but it's just why risk it? And then the other one we were going to talk about is keeping your devices up to date.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Oh, look, this morning on the way in to see you, I'm obviously into my cybersecurity, so I get my news is really sad. There's BBC News and it's telling you all these things, and then my news pop-ups is all about O-days. It's all about cybersecurity things. So it's really, pretty geeky. But the thing is, I got no life. I guess the thing is, I'm seeing this information and I get the latest in cyber threats, which I guess you'd hope that I would. But most people aren't going to see that information because it's not of interest.
And it's boring.
It's boring, yeah.
Now, why are we doing this episode?
Hopefully you're not 100% bored.
No. I'm excited about this.
So, like I mentioned there's a term called O-Day, which basically means there's a cyber event on some software that a lot of people might use that has a 0-day O-Day. And what that means is that risk has come out within a day, and has been that vulnerability in a known piece of software, and people have exploited that already. Now, most of the vulnerabilities that we have in our software aren't ODs, but ODs are particularly worrisome because nobody's had a chance to fix them yet. Software vulnerabilities can happen, and these are the things that people online will exploit. So it's not just ODs. If you don't update your computer, if you don't patch it, that's what the tech term is, then you are at a higher level of risk of being exploited for these vulnerabilities. And that could mean that your computer could then be used as a spam bot to send more spam. It could mean that your malware could be infecting your machine. It could be that you're subject to ransomware, and then your computer's completely locked out and scrambled. So, there's a whole bunch of issues that could happen as a result of the vulnerabilities.
So I guess you're saying they figure out there's a problem with their software, or maybe something to do with like Microsoft or one of your apps or one of your programs that you use, and they go, quick update so we can patch over the security flaw.
Yeah.
So there's a big bloody hole in the back of the house. We're going to put a door in it. So make sure you update them.
So today's OD was the Chrome web browser.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that obviously millions and millions of people worldwide use Chrome.
I would say
billion.
Day.
Yeah, billions.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people. It's the most popular web browser made by Google. And there's a thing called WebP, which does images. So what I'm saying is that, normal web browsing, you view images all the time. Well, there's a particular aspect to the Chrome browser which was found today to be vulnerable, which has been vulnerable for a long time, but the vulnerability was found today and has been exploited in the last day or two. That's therefore called an OD. So if somebody attacked you or sent you an email or gave you a link to a website that exploited that particular OD, then they could have access to your computer and therefore, ergo, the information that is on your computer.
Update your Chrome.
Update your Chrome, absolutely. And it's a constant thing. You just need to keep your computer up to date. And it is a pain. It can take a while to update. I know.
Just before we recorded this podcast, my computer said, we need to do an update. It took about half an hour. It was a big one.
Yeah. It can be a real pain in the bum.
Luckily, you're a patient man, Alice. Okay. And then the next part we're going to talk about was making sure that you're using simple... you're not using simple account recovery questions. So like, what's your mum's maiden name? That type of thing, I assume.
Yeah, that's right. And it kind of just goes with what we were talking about earlier on with passwords. So if you've got, your passwords can be recovered, having a simple password recovery process, these information about you as an individual, if you think about information that you put up on social media, for example, on Facebook or Twitter or something like that, or the social engineering I talked about earlier on about people phoning up. They don't have to phone you up. They could phone somebody else up that knows you fairly well and gather these pieces of information about what's your mother's maiden name or what's your date of birth or all that. So if you use these simple password recovery information, then it's basically as good as having your password for your computer and so forth.
So put your deepest, darkest secrets as your recovery questions.
Maybe not your deepest, darkest secrets. Because that could be quite dodgy as well.
True. Yeah, you don't want
people knowing that. But
well, they already know it. They've got all the insights already.
Yeah. So to just try not to use something which would be dead simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then antivirus software. What's your recommendation around that? Because I can't stand Norton and McAfee. I feel like they're almost like malware disguised as virus.
They are, yeah. So I mean, my particular favorites are not like you say McAfee or Norton. They have been around for a long time and they were really good. But I think I don't want to go on and say, you need to buy this brand. I'm quite, agnostic. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for.
There you go. I could just tell.
I won't say a particular brand, but I think, use your own imagination and go out and do some research. It was definitely worthwhile looking at the different products out there. But I would say, yes, to your point, McAfee and Norton were really reputable brands at one point in time. And McAfee was actually the very first antivirus product out there in the 1980s, but they all got bought over by companies that were really more interested in just making money. So whilst they probably do antivirus, there's a whole heap of other stuff that's kind of in that software, like you say, that kind of almost makes them like malware themselves. So yeah, there are other brands out there. And so it doesn't take long to go on a Google search and just ask Google what the best brands are, and you'll find out quite quickly. Don't click on the sponsored links, obviously, because they're going to say, but yeah, there's quite a lot of impartial advice out there. So do a little bit of research yourself. Yeah, there's plenty of good products out there, and you don't necessarily have to pay a lot of money.
And what about the Windows Defender that's on updated systems? How does that compare?
So
that's the default one, right?
Yeah, and it's actually pretty good. I would say that back in the day, Microsoft didn't provide antivirus with your PC, and you had to go off and buy a product to secure your PC from malware and viruses, as they were known back in those days. But these days, Defender is a really good product, and it's just a case of making sure that that's kept up to date. So whatever you have, just make sure you keep it up to date.
And for those using Mac, I mean, I'm not sure if it was a myth back in the day that they kind of came with its own protection, but
yes, it was. Yeah. Again, whilst there are antivirus products out there for Macs, I would still probably recommend that you have an antivirus product on your Mac, just in the same way that you have on your PC. It is true that Macs have less viruses or malware for them, simply because they're a lower target. I think it covers about 3 or 4% of the overall PC market, the computer market, the personal computer market, in terms of Macintosh owners. And that number is slightly rising. So obviously, the people who write malware, they tend to write it more for a Windows computer because it's massively more.
Casting a wider net.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I still recommend having antivirus software for a Mac.
Now, we've covered off clicking on email links. Is there anything else you'll add to that? Because I feel that you quite like, for instance, Calendly to book a link.
Yeah.
I think I did that for this catch up. That's something you need to click on in an email. What are some best practice tools you'd recommend for somebody who wanted to protect themselves, but they know that they have to click links as part of their day-to-day job within an email?
I mean, I think it's about it. Not necessarily, you don't have to spend money to have vigilance when looking at email links. I would say just having a look at the link, or how do you have a look at the link is what I mean. If you use, there are certain software out there that does it better than others. Like Microsoft Outlook is by far one of the more popular pieces of software. And it's not the best in terms of how it handles links. So perhaps look at more secure email software if you can. But what I would say is, regardless of the software, when you hover your mouse over the link, you'll get a full link. So usually it'll say something like click here, just the word here, and it doesn't show you the full link. Well, if you hover over the link, it will usually expand it to show you the whole
At the bottom
link.
of the screen, it will show like...
Yeah, it's going to be there somewhere. Or it really depends on what mail software you're using. But really look for that. And if it says, if it's like a link to something on Microsoft or maybe, let's take one of the banks. Say it's, Kiwi Bank, right? Okay, so it says Kiwi Bank, and you know that kiwibank.co.nz is the link to Kiwi Bank. But all of a sudden, when you hover over that link and it says .wi/bank or just something, you really, really, really look at that link. Is it a legit looking link? It probably isn't. So it might be worth your time just going onto the Kiwi Bank website manually or finding out just what that link really is. Try not to just click it blithely. There's software out there that will help you train and understand not to click on things. There's a software called Know Before, and there's lots of antivirus, anti-malware software which will check the link before you actually click on it, or during the click. It will take you to a sort of link verification service first before it actually pushes you on to things like that. But yeah, know before is quite good because it gives you sort of training on why you shouldn't click a link. There's stuff, so training out there like that.
I've heard some companies do phishing tests as well.
That's right. So that's what know before does.
Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few different softwares out there that does that sort of thing.
And when we say phishing, we don't obviously mean like putting the hook out there and having a few cold ones. Yeah, PH phishing.
Phishing, yeah.
Cool. And then we talked about this a little bit before, but limiting information online. So little things I do is I try and make my like Instagram or Facebook really private and cut down
for sure
that print, but it's hard, we're putting all this content out here.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I would say is that if you have an online presence, really, really think about the information that you put up there. Would you want Joe Public knowing about it, right? It's like having a postcard, right? When you send a postcard through the mail person can read the content on that, and potentially anybody could see that. So would you post private information about you on the postcard? The answer is no. I would say the same applies to using social media. Don't post things that you don't want other people, even because the thing is that anybody could see it. So not even just your friends can necessarily see it. And it goes back to the thing I was talking about, your privacy settings. Always lock down your privacy settings as much as you possibly can. And I know that takes time and it's sometimes a bit confusing. And I think that's almost deliberate by some of these social networks. But really just suppose, I think, that every piece of information that you post on social media can be seen by people that you wouldn't necessarily want to see that information. So just don't post anything that you don't want to be seen.
It can help people with the social engineering.
Absolutely.
I listened to a great podcast. I think it was called Darknet Diaries.
Yeah, great podcast.
This one episode was with this lady. I can't remember her exact title. Somebody laughed at me when I was telling the story the other day. Her title was like a physical penetration tester or something like that.
Yep.
And her role is that businesses hire her to see where the flaws are in their company. Yep. And she doesn't know anything about computers. All she does know is how to manipulate people like security guards.
Yep.
And there was one guy.
Social engineering.
You must have heard this episode before. Yep. It's with a Scouse lady called Jenny. And there was one story that I really found interesting. There was a guy who hired her saying, you can't get me. If you can get me, I'll give you a bounty or whatever it is. And she went to such lengths where she figured out that he liked to go to this particular charity, and then she turned up pretending to be a particular person that might want to donate to it. I'm probably telling it a little bit different to how she did, but the end story is that she managed to get into his office and then requested a decaf cup of coffee. So he had to go, think about that. And he left the office. His computer's unlocked. She sent an email to her saying, this is blah, blah, blah. I've got into his system.
Yeah. And I think it was some sort of like Christian group or fellowship or something like that. Was that it?
I can't remember exactly.
All these people, they would have meals and go out and be really good friends and so forth. And so she found that information on Facebook about these employees and then befriended those employees in this Christian fellowship group, and she did this for weeks. It wasn't just a day or two. She actually, got to know these people in the organization, and then eventually moved, up through the organization to get to know the CEO or something like that. So it was a slow, gradual process, but then she got to the computer and hit the jackpot, and that was it. So yeah, she got paid the ransom. Fortunately, she was one of the good people, not...
That's it.
That's it. But yeah, people do pay for this sort of service, yeah.
So even thinking about that and just tying it back to what we discussed earlier, imagine that she does that whole decaf thing. She goes around to his desk, but he runs a clear desk policy and it's locked.
Yeah. Much better. And that's a simple thing. Yeah. No, she would be stuffed. That would be her, no bounty for her. But yeah she got the bounty. She did.
And then, so the last point, I know we've covered a lot of content here, so thank you for those who are still with us. But the last point was just your risk and asset register and what's best practice there.
I have spoken to a lot of people. I go through the boring stuff as well. So there's the Reserve Bank have actually got a really good sort of policy document online, which is written in 2021. I really like it, but I guess I'm kind of techie and reading that document. It's probably about 20 pages long. It's not huge, but it's also a lot to take in. If you're dealing with, risk and insurance and so forth, it makes sense, but also it's a lot to take in from a cyber perspective. One of the things which is, as a takeaway, I would say, and I've spoken to a lot of organizations and they don't have this, or at least they don't have this in the way that it should be done. So a lot of organizations have an asset register. And an asset register, in my opinion, should be people, process, it should be policies, and it should be technology. So it's not just about the things that you can kick. It's about the things that, are your information. It's all of your assets of an organization. So there's assets, and then there is the risk register, right? And a lot of businesses have risk register and asset register. They have two different documents. Now, that's fine. You can have those two different documents, but they become really powerful if you combine the two of them into one thing, because okay, this is my crown jewels, whatever that might be, whether it's a server with all of your information on it about all your clients, but also think about how that the information on that is, what's the likelihood of that information being exposed is, and also the risk of that happening. What's the actual, the risk?
It's all connected.
Yeah. So the DIA, for example, has what's called the 5x5 risk register. And again, that you get scores based on that. So it's a really useful sort of method of scoring the risk and the likelihood. And so you can use those two things. And I help my clients with realizing the level of risk that they have over the assets in their organization. So, yeah, it sounds like it's a lot of work, but actually, a lot of businesses already have the risk register and an asset register. It's just about putting them together, and in the end of the day, it's just common sense. A lot of that is common sense. Yeah,
I like it. We've covered a lot of good content. I think somebody could go away having listened to this.
Yeah,
make a few simple changes. Clear desk policy.
Yeah,
like one great example before, and protect themselves. But if they wanted to delve even further into this, where do they find you?
Oh, they can find me. I'm on the web, so revolutioninfosec.com. They can get me on LinkedIn, of course. Just search for Alistair J. Ross. And I've also on YouTube. I do sort of videos a wee bit like this, just like little nuggets. Some of them are only just like 3 or 9 minutes long. They're not long videos. I try to make sure that we're all guilty of not having a big attention span. So yeah, just search for Revolution Infosec on YouTube as well.
This is a very ambitious video, isn't it?
This one?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if you set aside a little bit of time, hopefully what I said at the beginning is your blast radius. If you're not doing anything with regards to cybersecurity or a little bit, your blast radius, the effect that it could have on your business could be this big, right? It could be the whole business. And if you listen to the points that we've just talked about, it's probably been really worth your time. If you change your controls to put these in place, your blast radius is that. So when you get attacked, the amount of risk that you have to your organization really will be minimized.
Absolutely.
So it's worth your time.
I love this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I really appreciate your time and coming in here. And I think good to have your expertise and just somebody else preaching about it, because I feel like I'm always talking about it. So thanks so much, Alistair. Alistair Ross from Revolution Infosec.
Thanks for having me.